I'm 24, and I lived alone with my dog, Bear, in a cozy townhouse up until 3 months ago. I moved in when I turned 22, having a decent enough job, and I loved the home, being the first place I'd ever rented for myself. But 2 years of happy living were ruined by this one night. It was gloomy outside and raining quite a lot. It was my day off, so I was sitting in my living room chair, scrolling on my phone. It was 8 p.m., just an hour before I usually went to bed. Bear had been sitting by the back door for a while, looking outside. He started whining and ran up to me, his way of communicating that he needed to go outside. I got up, let him out, then closed the door and stood in the kitchen. Though it was just a townhouse, there was a small fence separating the backyards, so I didn't have to worry about Bear running away or anything. Also, I should mention that Bear isn't a large dog at all. He's just fluffy and small, like a teddy bear. Not long, maybe 15 or 20 seconds. After I let him outside, I heard him whimper and bark. It was a very cowering bark, like he was running away from something. It scared me, and I rushed to the door, looking out. I saw Bear running back toward me, his tail between his legs. Once he was inside, I leaned my head outside and scanned the backyard, expecting a coyote or something to be lurking by the fence. But nothing was there. I made sure Bear was okay and locked the door. He never does anything like that, so it really worried me. I let him sit on my lap for the rest of the night. For the next 30 minutes, he was constantly perking his head up and staring at the windows and doors, each time at a different one. Then, after about 45 minutes of sitting there, Bear turned his head and stared at the window behind me, lowering his ears and growling. I turned, looking at where he was focused, and there, just a couple of feet from us, was a man staring back at me. He was almost pressed up against the glass. I jumped up and screamed, stepping backward. The man sprinted away down the side of the house. Bear started barking again from the sudden chaos. I quickly closed the blinds and checked all of the others, making sure they were secure. From the quick glimpse I got, I didn't recognize the man. I didn't know who he was, what he was doing here, or why he was staring at me. I tried to listen for any more indications that he was still around, but the rain outside was too loud, covering up any possible sounds. Bear seemed calmer, though, so I stayed up for a while longer, just to be safe. I then went upstairs and had Bear sleep in my room with me. It took a long time for me to fall asleep with so much on my mind, but after an hour or so, I slowly dozed off. When I woke up, Bear was standing right by the bedroom door, staring at it. This was freaky to see, waking up in the middle of the night. But not even seconds later, I heard something below me, a man talking. And not long after, I heard another man on the other side of the house talking back. Their footsteps were loud, and they didn't even seem to be whispering. It was as if they didn't care if I knew they were inside my home. My bedroom door was locked, but I had nowhere else to go. I went over to Bear, trying to keep him calm. I picked him up and went over to the corner of my room, behind the bed. It took me a while to realize, but then it struck me. I hadn't heard any noises at all in the past minute. No footsteps, no voices. This was when I took my phone out and called the police, whispering as softly as I could while giving them my address. Bear started a low growl, then began barking and whining as 2 sets of footsteps started making their way up the stairs. I begged the operator to send someone immediately. The 2 men started talking to each other again, but it was hard to make out their words. "Hey, we just want to talk. We're not here to hurt you," one of them said. I screamed, telling them that I had called the cops and to leave. I was panicking, not knowing what else to do. There was a pause afterward. "We're here to help you," one of the men said. I didn't respond, as I was busy trying to muffle my crying. The door remained silent, and I could only hear their breathing behind it for what felt like a whole minute. Then one of them walked back down the stairs. I couldn't tell where they went, or if they left or not, but I was sure only 1 set of footsteps left the bedroom door. It was so quiet, though, and I couldn't hear any breathing in the far distance. The soft sound of sirens started to get louder, and a sense of safety was finally coming back. Once the sirens got closer, I heard footsteps running out of the house downstairs, but now I was unsure of where the other man was. It seemed really unlikely for him to still be by my door, but I could swear I never heard him leave. I waited for the police to pull up and make their way inside. I heard them searching downstairs, then slowly making their way upstairs and knocking on my door. I almost didn't want to answer, still thinking the other man had to be somewhere nearby. When I opened the door, though it was just an officer, I immediately told him about my concerns, and he directed me out of the house while one of his partners continued searching. But nobody was found. The only thing they were able to find was watery footprints all around the house, as well as an unlocked window, though, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I had left it unlocked or not. It terrified me, though, feeling so confident that the other man was still there, never hearing him leave, but then there being no trace of him. It made it impossible to sleep at night, having this feeling that someone was still in the house, watching me. I moved out 3 months ago. It was too much stress on my mind having a loose end like that, especially since neither of them were ever identified or arrested. There was no clear intention the men had either, which is just another question added to the list of uncertainty. Even now, living miles away in a new apartment, I still sometimes feel like I'm not alone. I was driving my delivery van back from a small out-of-town delivery one night. It was somewhere around 11 p.m., and the rain was steadily coming down outside. I didn't usually work this late, but every once in a while, there'd be a delivery made after store hours. The stores I delivered to were spread out, so most of the driving was on long highways with nothing interesting to see. As I went along the road, I saw headlights up ahead. Although I was going the speed limit, I caught up to them quickly. It was an old pickup truck driving really slow in front of me, as if they were scared of slipping on the wet road. But they were going way too slow for it to be practical. After a minute, I started getting impatient and began looking for a chance to go around them. I sped up a little, putting on my turn signal so they knew what I was doing. But just before I made my move, the truck suddenly lost control and ran off the road. I slammed on my brakes and pulled over. I stayed in my van, looking out the side window. The truck had somehow barely missed a few trees but was down a slope and likely stuck. Even though it wasn't my fault at all, I felt really bad and couldn't just leave them without at least calling for help. I tried dialing 911, but there was no signal at all. After a minute of not seeing any movement from the truck, I got even more nervous. I got out of my van to check on them. I walked down the side of the road, through the cold rain, and carefully made my way down the slope until I reached the trees. The truck was wedged in some bushes but didn't seem to be too damaged. I approached the driver's side door. The window was fogged over, and I couldn't see inside. I knocked and then opened the door. There was a man sitting in the driver's seat, frantically trying to get the truck to turn on. "Hey, are you okay? Did you want some help?" I asked. He looked up at me, not saying a word for a few seconds. Then he responded with a simple, "Well, give me a ride." I told him I could take him to the nearest gas station so he could call for help, but that was as far as I could go. After some thinking, he agreed to it. He stepped out of the truck, and I led the way back to my van. Despite the rain, he walked slowly, his eyes never leaving me. Every time I looked back, he was just staring at me, never smiling or frowning, just staring. Creeped me out, but maybe he was just trying to make sure I wasn't the creepy one. We both got inside, and I started driving. I really didn't know how close the nearest gas station was, but I was sure it couldn't be more than 50 or 60 miles out. The first few minutes, I tried to make some small talk, but the man didn't really respond. I thought maybe his head was hurting from the crash, but either way, it made things really awkward. Every once in a while, I'd look over, and the man would be staring at me again. It was like he didn't blink. His gaze was cold, and I felt a tightening in my chest. I was starting to wonder who this man was that I had picked up. I felt like any normal person would be grateful for my help after getting stranded in the middle of nowhere. Thankfully, not long into the drive, I saw the lights of a small town up ahead. But as we got closer, the man started acting even stranger. He was looking around a lot, both inside the car and outside the windows. Felt like he was trying to spot something, or maybe someone. When I pulled into the gas station, I parked the van and asked if he needed help with anything else. He didn't answer, but I felt tension hanging in the air, like he was contemplating something. I tried to break the silence. "Okay, well, I'm going to get back on the road then," I said, trying to make the best of the situation. But suddenly, the man took one more look around, then forced his body over and shoved me against the door. He started punching me as I opened the door and tried to get out. I couldn't process what was happening at first, but just then, the passenger doors swung open and the man was yanked away from me. I was still trying to catch my breath, confused and disoriented, when I got out of the van. There were 2 police cars and some officers holding the man down. They didn't give me all the details, but apparently, the man had been running away from a serious crime in a stolen truck. Once an officer had found the truck crashed on the side of the road, they called in some backup officers to stake out at the gas station and wait for him. They didn't know he was with me when I pulled in, but once they saw me getting attacked, they jumped in to help. I don't know if he attacked me in an effort to steal my van, or if it was because he saw the police cars and thought I had turned him in, but either way, it was a horrifying experience. I knew the man was creepy, but I had no idea how much danger I was truly in. If those police officers hadn't been waiting at the gas station, I don't know if I'd be here right now. I had just gotten home from work and was sitting back on the couch with a movie on. It was storming outside, and it was Friday, so what better to do than stay up late and watch some TV? I had the window curtains open in case any lightning started up, hoping to catch some cool sights. It doesn't rain very often where I live, so nights like these are rare and always get me excited. But as the night went on, and at just about midnight, I noticed something outside my window across the street. There was a man walking down the sidewalk. He had no hood or coat on, he was completely soaked, but he walked up to one of the houses and onto their porch. I couldn't see too much through the rain and dark, but it looked like he was waiting for them to enter the door. After a minute, he walked down to the sidewalk again and continued further down the street. I couldn't see any further, but seeing that gave me an uneasy feeling. At this time of night, and in this kind of weather, it just wasn't normal to be walking around and up to people's houses. I closed the curtains by the window, just so that if he did come to my house, he wouldn't see me inside and expect me to answer the door. But only 15 minutes passed before I heard a sound outside my house. Someone was walking up my driveway and approaching my front door. There was no knock or doorbell, just the sound of footsteps moving around, walking across my porch and near one of the windows, then going back to the door. By now, I was really confused and wanted to look out the peephole, but I was worried that he'd hear me. I waited, and after a minute, the noises stopped. I quietly walked up to the door and peeked through the crack. It was the man I'd seen earlier, and he was still standing at the edge of my porch, staring at the door with a blank face. I watched him for a few seconds before I got really creeped out and backed away. It was now that I started to think calling the police would be worth it, especially if he was going around to other people's houses and doing the same thing. I turned to grab my phone, but just then, I heard the sound of footsteps departing. I looked out again and he was gone. After giving it some thought, I felt that this was still too creepy to not inform the police about. Whatever that man was doing was not normal. I called and let them know about it. They said they would send an officer to patrol the neighborhood and see if they could get the man to stop or at least explain what he was doing. But that was about all that could be done at the time. I thanked them, hung up, and checked the door one more time before going back to the couch. The whole thing had really worn me out, though, taking away the relaxing night and just making me exhausted. I shut everything off and went upstairs to get in bed, but as I got in and turned off the lights, a loud thump sounded from downstairs. I sat up in bed, listening. Then it came again. This time, it was louder, like someone smashing something against the wall. I got up and ran to the top of the stairs, and now hearing it for the third time, I realized it was coming from the front door. Someone was hitting something against it, as if they were trying to forcefully break it down. I walked down a few steps and looked over, seeing the door violently shake every time they hit it. It looked like they were just a few hits away from breaking it down. Now, absolutely terrified, I locked myself in the bedroom and called the police again. The operator told me that an officer was in the neighborhood and would be here in just a minute. But through their voice, I heard would shatter, and the door slammed against the ground. Footsteps quickly moved through the downstairs, going into every room without stopping. Then they began moving up the stairs. But just as the footsteps reached the stairs, they were cut off by the officer pulling in and running up to the house. The intruder immediately stopped and ran for the back door, but the officer came in and yelled at him. Apparently, they had trouble getting the back door open in the heat of the moment, so the officer was able to catch him and get him down into the car. The man, who looked like a psycho up close, refused to say anything, not even a single word, before they drove him off. His intentions were clear, though. He was carrying a heavy hammer and had a bunch of zip ties in his pocket. That doesn't exactly sound like a coincidence, considering what he was doing. Why he chose to target my house isn't clear, but what likely saved me was calling the police that first time. If I hadn't, the officer wouldn't have been in the neighborhood so close by, and he probably would have gotten here too late. I could have been gone, and no one would have ever seen me again.